The last thing he said before the line went dead was a blade. I wish you'd never been my father. By the time the dial tone faded, the house felt like a church after a funeral, full of echoes, short on air. Grief has a way of rearranging your furniture when you're not looking. I learned that the year my wife, Laura, died, and the house in Oak Park went quiet in a way that even the cicadas respected. 3 years later, the quiet still lived in the baseboards, but I had made peace with it. Brewed my coffee the way she liked, kept her garden thriving along the fence, and called our son Ethan every Tuesday. That was the ritual. That was the thread. Hey, kid, I'd said that Tuesday in September, watching steam rise from my mug like prayer. How's the semester? You're close to the finish line. Silence stretched. I could hear campus noise on his end. Doors closing, voices, a bus exhaling. It's fine, Dad. Normal. Normal. Ethan used to talk in paragraphs. Lately, he rationed out syllables like quarters in a jar. He was 24 now, a senior at UIC, living alone in the West Loop condo I bought, so he wouldn't have to commute an hour each way from the suburbs. I paid for that place, with 30 years of teaching and night consulting, plus the check from selling Laura's old CRV. The last thing in our driveway that still smelled like her shampoo on summer nights. You sound off, I said. Everything okay with classes, workload, you need anything? He sighed. It wasn't the tired kind. It was the irritated kind I used to hear from ninth graders when I asked for cell phones. Look, I'm busy. I don't need an interrogation. Ethan, I'm not interrogating you. I'm asking because I care. You know your education matters to me. Yeah, he snapped. I know. You remind me every time. You and the money, you and Mom, always Mom. I stood in our kitchen, one hand on the back of the chair Laura used to sit in, and felt the rails of the conversation go crooked. Don't talk about your mother like she's a chore you need to get through. 3 years, Dad, she's gone. You can stop making me live like an obituary. A pause opened up, big as Lake Michigan in a nor'easter. I swallowed. Tell me what's going on. His voice came back flat and hard. Fine. You want the truth? I failed 3 classes. I have to retake them. I won't graduate in December. Happy? The floor tipped. 3 classes. My brain did math the way it does when you hear a diagnosis. Condo mortgage, tuition checks, the second-hand Toyota I put in my name so the insurance stayed sane. The months of Venmo transfers for groceries, utilities, textbooks that were more cocktail receipts than course packets. All of it flashed like a ledger turning red. What happened? I asked softly. Let's figure it out together. I don't want to figure it out with you, he said. I'm tired of your pressure, your checklists, your calendars. I'm tired of you. Ethan. And then he said it. The sentence people say in movies when they want to burn a bridge and make sure you watch. I wish you'd never been my father. All you do is press and guilt. Click. I didn't cry. I sat down carefully, like the air had gotten heavier, and stared at the coffee. The yard beyond the window was gold with late afternoon sun. Our neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, walked her beagle past the fence. The house was so still, I could hear the clock in the hallway tick and my own heartbeat answer back. In the den, I keep a shoebox of things I don't take out unless I have to. I opened it. The first thing on top was a photo from Ethan's high school graduation. He's in a blue robe, collar crooked, grinning like he's caught the moon. His arm is around my shoulders. His other hand clutches a diploma that's still creased like a fresh bill. Under it, a note from his sophomore year of college. I promise I'll make you and Mom proud. His handwriting was always a little too neat, like he was trying to make up for the chaos inside. I closed the box and pulled a different file. This one had numbers. The deed to the West Loop condo, title to the Toyota, closing statements. My name, my signature, my initials on page after page. I had bought him a foundation. He had just jumped on it hard enough to test the bolts. There's a part of love that looks like rescue and a part of love that looks like restraint. That night I found the edge of the second kind. At 7:31 p.m., I called my attorney, the one I've known since he was a nervous associate, sweating through his first closing. "Cal?" I said when he picked up. "I need you to start proceedings tomorrow. List the condo, sell the Corolla." I could hear him stop typing. He's the kind of man who fills silence with clicking. "Michael, that's sudden. Does Ethan know?" "He will." "Are you sure?" I was 65 and felt older. I carried Laura through chemo in the winter of 2021. I held our boy at her graveside. I sold her car to give him a shorter walk to everything that mattered. "I'm sure," I said, and felt the click happen inside me, the one where you're done arguing with yourself. We talked logistics, disclosures, timelines, best case comps, whether to show the place furnished or staged. He reminded me about tenant rights. I reminded him there was no lease. It was my name on the title. I'd let my son live there on a promise and a prayer. The prayer had come back with teeth. When I hung up, the kitchen felt different. My hands had stopped shaking. I made tea. I took another look at the deed. This was not revenge. It was a fence. If I didn't build it now, the fall later would be farther. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Sorry for earlier. Stressed. Talk tomorrow." He was always quick with the Band-Aid, never the stitches. I put the phone face down on the table. The seconds on the clock stopped sounding like a heartbeat and started sounding like the echo you hear in a tunnel before a distant train. The next 2 days were full of emails and notaries and a real estate photographer I met at the condo in the middle of a Wednesday when I knew Ethan would be in class or somewhere rehearsing for a life he didn't have yet. Walking through that space hurt. The place I bought for him to study in had become a showroom for takeout containers and laundry baskets and an expensive speaker that did not look like it knew what a quiet night felt like. The desk was covered in receipts, none of which had ISBN numbers. There were also signs of my son here, stupid and human and mine. The throw blanket his mother knitted while waiting for scan results was folded at the foot of the couch. On the fridge, a magnet Laura bought in Door County held up a grocery list. Eggs, oatmeal, coffee, check marks beside all three, a kindness like a flare. Back in Oak Park, I opened a new Instagram account because what else was I going to do? Call his friends and beg for honesty? I found him through a tag from a kid with 1,000 followers and a jawline. The photos told their own story. Bars in River North, plates that cost as much as weekly groceries, a borrowed leather jacket and the caption, "Work hard, play harder," on a night I knew he'd skipped class. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst was a video. Fireworks over the lake, the skyline posed like a postcard, and Ethan's voice off camera laughing, "My dad was made to be milked. He loves being the hero." I closed the app carefully, walked out back. Laura's hydrangeas were creaking under the weight of their last blue. "I'm doing this," I told them. "I'm doing the hard thing you always said I had in me." Cal moved with the efficiency of someone with a mortgage. 2 kids in soccer and a calendar that runs when he does. Offers came quickly. The West Loop sells itself when the sun hits the brick right. We accepted an all-cash bid from a young couple who had color-coded spreadsheets for everything down to their dish towels. The car went even faster. A line cook from Pilsen paid in cashier's check and shook my hand too long, like he could feel what the sale meant and didn't have the words for it. We scheduled formal notice for Wednesday morning. The legal envelope would explain that the unit had changed hands and he had 48 hours to vacate. I reread it on my porch swing like it was a sermon. Every sentence was a plank I could stand on. At 9:43 a.m. Wednesday, my phone lit up. Ethan. I let it ring to voicemail once, twice, 3 times, like a heartbeat you hold a second too long to feel the edge of it. On the 4th try, I answered. "What is this?" he shouted, voice high with fear. "There's a guy at my door with a packet. 48 hours. You sold my place. No, I said, I sold mine. Dad, come on, please, you can't do this. I can, I said, and I did. He started talking fast, stacking words like sandbags. I listened. When he ran out of breath, I told him what I'd seen and what I'd done and what the next 48 hours would require. I told him where the title was filed and whose name was on which line. I told him that love is not a credit card. He hung up, called back, hung up, texted until my phone looked like a slot machine that wouldn't stop paying out. The messages came hot, then apologetic, then bargaining. The rhythm of a person hitting a wall and trying to convince the wall to move. I didn't answer until noon. Dad, he said, winded like he'd run down 5 flights of stairs and back up again. What am I supposed to do? Be 24, I said. Find a job, find a room, earn what you spend, put your name on something you're willing to risk. There was a silence on the other end with weight to it. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its polish. I'm scared. I know. The first night, he slept on a friend's couch. The second, he found out that friends who love your bottle service don't always love your bags. On the third morning, my doorbell rang at 6:37. I didn't rush. I made coffee. I watched steam climb the kitchen window and blur the yard. Then I opened the door. Ethan stood on the brick stoop with 2 suitcases and the kind of face you make when everything you own suddenly weighs 10 pounds more. His eyes were red in a rookie way. He looked younger than he should have, like the time he was 10, and came home from a sleepover at midnight because he didn't like the shadows on the wall. Dad, he said. Come in, I said, and stepped aside. He put the bags down like they contained explosives. In the living room, he looked at his mother's piano and the photos on the mantel and the ugly lamp I can't throw away because she loved it, and then looked down at his hands like he'd forgotten what hands were for. I'm sorry, he said, and started to cry the quiet kind, the kind that hits in the joints. He searched for words and found none. I was awful. You were, I said softly. Not because I like being cruel, but because naming things right matters. And I was indulgent. He nodded. I could see him building the sentence in his mind that would ask me to fix it. I can't live here, I said, before he said anything. Not now, not like this, but I won't leave you in the street. He nodded again. This time, when he looked up, his eyes were steady. I'll do whatever you say. I don't believe in penance. I believe in terms. I had already made some. A rooming house in North Lawndale, I said. Shared kitchen, clean, no frills, $800 a month. I'll cover rent for 6 months. You cover everything else. No booze-heavy nights, no designer anything. You'll find a job by the 15th. You'll pay your tuition from your checks. Grades above a B. Weekly budget reports. No loans. No safety nets. At 6 months, we reassess. Not with promises, with proof. He nodded like a man signing a contract on his own bones. Okay, we'll write it down, I said. You'll sign. I'll sign. I wanted him to feel the weight of ink. That afternoon, we drove west on I-290 in a car that still carried his mother's church parking lot smell of peppermint and hand lotion. The rooming house had a stoop that had seen a lot, and a manager with a voice like gravel that had smoked. The room was 9 feet by 11. A single bed, a dresser, a desk, a window that looked across an alley to someone else's 9 by 11. He stood in the doorway and took a breath like he was trying on a smaller life. It's enough, he said. It is, I said, and believed it. That night, back in Oak Park, I read our terms again under the kitchen light. I signed and dated them like they were a new constitution for the two of us. Then I set them under Laura's magnet on the fridge and poured myself a glass of water that tasted like the first sip after a long run. When my phone buzzed at 10:08 p.m., it was a photo from Ethan, his desk with a legal pad labeled Week 1 Budget, a ham sandwich on a paper plate, a cup of coffee in a chipped mug. The caption said, Starting. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all week. If you're listening to this, and you've carried love like a mortgage and grief like a second job, maybe you know this part, the part where you do the hard thing and then sit with the quiet, waiting to see if it grows something better than the easy ever did. I don't know where the next weeks will take us. All I know is I've chosen a kind of love that has a spine, and I'm going to see it through. Before I go, if this hits close to home, tell me where you're listening from. I like knowing the towns where these echoes land. If it felt true, give it a like so it finds someone who needs it. And if you want more stories that walk through the hard parts with you, you're welcome to stick around. I woke up the next morning to a text that was not an apology and not a plea. It was a photo of a help wanted sign taped to a storefront window along Ogden Avenue. Stock associate, night shift, 17 ain't HR, apply inside. Under it, Ethan wrote, interview at 2. He had circled the words with his finger before he sent it. The red ring was shaky, like he'd made the mark on a moving bus. I stared at the image until the glass of my phone went warm. A week ago, my son would have sneered at anything that didn't come with a title. Now he was chasing a job that came with a back brace and a lot of tape guns. I made eggs. The kitchen was still and bright. The September sun hadn't yet tipped into October's slant. On the table lay the paper I'd made us both sign. 6 months, no loans, no shortcuts, a weekly budget log. I thought of the lines at the bottom where our names sat, shoulder to shoulder, and wondered if ink could hold what intention couldn't. At 11:05 a.m., my friend and oldest confidant Gary Bennett called. We met in the teacher's lounge at Oak Park and River Forest High, back when chalk dust was still a thing. He was the one who brought me bad coffee when Laura started chemo. He was also the one who would tell me if I'd lost my mind. So, he said without hello, how's the revolution? It's quiet, I said. He's interviewing for a stock job. Good, Gary said. Work that makes your hands hurt teaches faster than lectures. He paused. You okay? Ask me in 6 months. In the early afternoon, I drove to the West Loop to check the mailbox at the condo building one last time. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and new money. The doorman, Al, nodded at me with a look that said he knew more than a man paid to watch doors should have to know. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and stood in the hallway a beat longer than necessary, listening for the ghost of my son moving around inside. Nothing, just the hum of the HVAC feeding a life that had already ended. Back home, I found Laura again in the ordinary places. A shopping list scribbled in her cursive at the back of a drawer, 2 recipes clipped from a magazine with the edges soft from years of kitchen steam. She made me believe in the holy nature of repetition. Call your son, water the basil, pay the mortgage, pray with your hands. The text from Ethan came at 3:47 p.m. Got it. Night shift. Start tomorrow, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. My first reaction was a miracle I didn't recognize at first. Pride without fear. Proud of you, I typed, and wondered if those 4 words landed on him as a bandage or a mirror. He responded with a thumbs up. A plain blue bubble where a full paragraph used to live. That night at 9:12 p.m., a second photo, a paper schedule with his name printed in block letters, his hours highlighted in yellow. No caption, no joke about how he wasn't built for nocturnal life. Just proof. I didn't answer. I closed my eyes and pictured him in a fluorescent back room, learning how to sling boxes from a man named Dale, whose knees were shot and who could tell you everything about fasteners. I pictured the way sweat pools at the small of your back when you bend, lift, turn, place. I pictured the pain in the hands the next morning, the dumb surprise of muscles discovering the old language of labor. At 6:41 a.m., the next day, a text, alive. Then, 2 minutes later, shower now, then nap. Calling you later. He didn't call, not that day. I didn't push. If I chase, he runs. If I hold ground, he circles back when he's ready. It's a rhythm I hate and understand. At 10 p.m., he went back for the second shift. On the third morning, he called. His voice sounded like an old tape, fuzzy at the edges, warm in the middle. "Dad, I didn't know how heavy boxes are." I laughed. He didn't. "I don't mean the weight," he said. "Not just that. I mean the hours. The way time feels different when you're on your feet all night. The way money has gravity." "Good," I said. "I brought peanut butter sandwiches and a banana," he added, like he needed me to understand he was making choices now, not just moving through a catalog. Everybody else bought the vending machine crap, and it looked so easy to do that, but I kept thinking, bananas are cheaper. There it was, the first small rewiring in a brain that used to measure dinners in likes and not in dollars. "Every little decision is a vote," I said. "You know that?" He was quiet. "Yeah. Tell me about your crew." He sighed. I could hear him shift, lying down on whatever mattress the rooming house provided. "Dale's run freight for 30 years. He has a scar over his eyebrow that he says he got from a box cutter and a lie. He calls all of us kid, whether we're 20 or 50. There's a woman named Deja who moves twice as fast as everyone else and hums gospel songs at 4 a.m. There's a guy from Guatemala who doesn't talk much, but always gives me the last of the packing tape when I'm running out. The details loosen something inside me. Sounds like you've got teachers." "Yeah," he said. "Just not the kind you can take notes on." He paused. "Dad? Yeah? I'm not asking for anything. I want you to know I'm going to pay the bursar. I'm going to do it with my money." "I know," I said, and believed him because sometimes belief is the seed the action grows around. He sent the first budget report that Sunday night. It was a photo of a sheet of lined paper that looked very much like the ones I used to grade for legibility. Incomes, $400 after taxes, 3 shifts. Expenses, $61, groceries, $25, CTA pass, $12, toothpaste, laundry, $9, work gloves. Saved, $301. Goals, tuition, $3,900. My throat tightened. His hand had always printed neatly when he knew I'd see it. Now the letters leaned forward, like they were already headed into next week. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. At sunset, I'd water Laura's plants and listen for the train sounds drifting over the neighborhood while imagining my son tightening the laces on his work boots. At sunrise, I'd pour coffee and read a text with a number that started where the last one left off. Once a week, we'd talk. I learned the names of the night manager's kids. I learned which brand of tape peeled clean and which tore like cheap promises. I learned what happens to a person's voice when he starts counting time in dollars per hour instead of hours per day. Halfway through October, Ethan called from a bus stop on a morning that had snapped overnight into cold. "I saw it," he said without preamble. "Saw what?" "The shirt. One of those stupid button-downs I used to buy on Wells. I stopped outside the window and did the math. 9 hours of work for a shirt." He laughed, but it wasn't a joke. "I used to think $150 was just a number you said at the register. And now it's 3 nights of jukebox humming in my head while I put cans of tomatoes onto high shelves." "Keep that math," I said. "It's better than what you learned in freshman algebra." He snorted. "Then I found a tutor for the classes. We meet 2 mornings a week at the Harold Washington Library. Before I crash, I'm not going to fail again." I closed my eyes and pictured him at a table under the tall atrium, notes spread out, head bent, the way he used to look when he built Lego cities on the rug. "Good," I said. "What's the plan for tuition?" 3 more weeks, he said without wobble. "Maybe 4. I picked up a Sunday shift." I heard bus brakes hiss on his end. Silence sat between us for a breath, then 2. "Dad?" "Yeah. Do you ever stop being mad at me?" I looked at the piano. Laura's sheet music, "The Water is Wide," still sat in the stand like she might walk in and play it. I thought about the boy on my stoop, begging in October, and the man counting pennies in a room that echo talked. It's not mad, I said, it's memory. There's a difference. And the memory gets lighter, I said, if you keep doing what you're doing. Okay, he said, I can do that. Undi, the day he paid the bursar, he didn't call me from the office. He didn't record a video of the receipt. He waited. That night, he texted, "It's done." Just that. No confetti. I stared at those two words until my eyes blurred. Then I got in the car with a bouquet from the corner market and drove to Queen of Heaven Cemetery, because there are some conversations you have to have in person. I stood in front of Laura's stone and set the flowers down and told her, he did it. I said it out loud so the wind could carry it and the grass could keep it. Then I went home and slept the way you sleep when a room in your body you didn't know you were clenching finally unlocks. In November, the nights lengthened. Ethan's reports shifted from numbers to sentences that had weight. Deja said I stack pallets like someone who reads instructions. Dale told me to take pride in straight rows. My tutor says my notes look like somebody else wrote them. It wasn't redemption yet. Redemption is expensive, but it was a down payment, and he was making it weekly. Thanksgiving came around like it always does, with more pie than anyone needs and a heaviness at the table where a person should be. Ethan asked if he could come to the house. I told him yes, with one rule: we don't pretend. We sat with plates balanced on our knees in the living room, football murmuring on the TV, and talked about the big things and the tiny ones. He told me a story about a forklift. I told him a story about his mother's first Thanksgiving in this house, when the garbage disposal ate the spoon. We laughed in the way people do, when the laughing is how you keep the crying where it belongs. Before he left, he stood by the door and held my gaze the way he used to when he was little and wanted to make sure I'd seen his drawing for the fridge. "Thank you," he said. "Not for dinner, for not making it easy." "You're welcome," I said, because I was, and because the sentence "I forgive you" has to be earned syllable by syllable, and he was still earning. We cleaned the dishes together. When he was gone, the house felt less empty than it had in years. I walked out back into the cold, touched the side of the hydrangea bush like it might speak, and whispered, "He's coming back to us." The first snow of December came sideways, a lake effect tantrum that turned alleys into chalk lines and made the world sound like a padded room. Ethan called after his shift, breath ghosting into the phone. I forgot how the city smells in winter. "Like salt and exhaust," I said. "And bread," he said. "Somewhere near the loading dock, somebody bakes bread at 4 a.m. It makes the whole block smell like a memory I can't place." I pictured the steam from a bakery vent mixing with his breath as he walked toward the bus. "How's the tutoring?" He hesitated. "I'm actually good at this when I don't pretend I'm fine. When I tell the truth in the study room, my brain behaves." I leaned back in my chair and took in that sentence the way you let a song settle when you know it's going to score a scene later. "Tell the truth early," I said. "It's cheaper." He laughed, a small real sound, then grew serious. "Dad, I need to ask you something," he said. "Not for money, for permission." I braced. "Okay." My shift lead asked if I'd be willing to train on the forklift. It's a raise. $2 more an hour if I get certified. It's also risk. I don't want you to think I'm chasing the shiny thing. $2 an hour is not shiny, I said. It's groceries and notebooks and a little less month at the end of the money. If you can do it safely, do it. I paused. Laura used to say, "Take the step the floor can hold." He was quiet. "I miss her," he said, not like a boy, but like a man admitting a perennial ache. "Me too," I said, "every day." He took the training. He sent me a photo of his laminated certification card, his name printed under a logo that looked like it had been designed in 1998 and never reconsidered. I look ridiculous in this picture, he texted, but my legs don't hurt as much. The budget reports changed shape. The numbers went up by just enough to feel it. 612 saved 1 week, $701 the next. He discovered that buying chicken thighs instead of breasts saves $2 a pound. He learned the difference between a want and a wish and wrote it down like an equation. Want, present tense pressure. Wish, future tense aim. Need, non-negotiable anchor. On a Wednesday, he called from inside the Harold Washington Library, his voice bouncing off the ceilings built for echoes. "Dad, listen to this," he said, and read a paragraph he'd written for a business ethics class. It wasn't the content that made me go still. It was the cadence. He'd found a way to put his spine into the sentences. "Who taught you that?" I asked when he finished. "My tutor," he said. "Also Deja. She says straight rows save lives, and I hear that in everything now." "Laura would love her," I said, and he didn't argue. Mid-December, the store manager called him into the office and asked if he'd take on an unofficial lead on Sunday nights. "It's not fancy," he told me later. "It's just I make the clipboard decisions when the real boss goes home." He said it without swagger, like someone reporting the weather. On Christmas Eve, he showed up at my door with a grocery bag, onions, carrots, celery, a rotisserie chicken, and a carton of stock. "I want to make soup," he said. "I can't afford prime rib, and I can't afford to pretend I can, but I can make soup." We chopped in the kitchen like a ceremony. He stood at the stove and learned the timing of the simmer. The smell of the moment vegetables become the thing that makes a house warm. He handed me the first taste on a spoon like a prize and watched my face the way a small boy watches his father watch him do anything. "It's perfect," I said. And it was, not because of the salt or the herbs, but because of the labor. After dinner, we carried a thermos of soup to Laura. We poured a spoonful onto the ground because she used to roll her eyes at that old custom and then smile anyway. On the walk back to the car, the snow started again, a fine powder that made the world look like the film version of itself. "I wrote you something," he said when we got home. He pulled a folded letter from his jacket pocket, his neatly printed name on the outside, like it was a homework assignment he wanted a grade on. I didn't open it while he watched. I put it on the mantel beside Laura's photo. He nodded. "Read it when it's quiet." He slept on the couch that night. In the morning, I found a note on the kitchen table listing the chores he'd done before he left for the bus. Dishes, trash, salt the walk. It looked like penance on paper. It looked like the scaffolding of a better man. When he was gone and the house had returned to its patient creak, I read the letter. It didn't ask for any revision of terms. It didn't rewrite history. It did one hard thing. It told the truth in paragraphs. He wrote about the shape of the insult he'd thrown and the weight of the box he'd lifted, and how, for the first time in his life, the two felt connected. He wrote about Deja's rows and Dale's scar, and the way the city at 5 a.m. feels like it belongs to workers and birds. He wrote about money with reverence, not fear. I placed the letter back on the mantel and stood there long enough to feel my knees ache. "You would be proud," I told Laura's picture. "So am I, just cautiously." January set its jaw. The nightly cold was the kind that made your teeth ache if you smiled too long outside. Ethan didn't miss a shift. He added a class he could have deferred and didn't. He called on a Tuesday at 6:12 a.m., wired with the false energy of a man who hasn't slept yet. They asked me to cover for the supervisor next month while he's out. It's a test. If I pass it, it's a promotion. What does passing mean? Deja said it means the pallets don't look drunk, he said, and the numbers match at dawn. Then make the rows so straight a ruler could cry, I said. He laughed. That's something Mom would say. It is, I said, and felt the old ache like a hand on my shoulder instead of a knife in my ribs. By February, the sun started returning like a slow apology. On a Thursday afternoon, Ethan called from the break room. I could hear the tinny rattle of a microwave and the distant beeps of a scanner. "I passed," he said without preamble. "Promotion's official next week. Title is shift lead. Pay bumps to 2050. I didn't say I'm proud right away. I said, what's your plan? He laughed softly. You and your plans. Then his voice settled. I made 3 columns last night. Debt, live, save. No debt. Living expenses, I can keep them where they are. Save, it gets bigger. I want to put aside enough for a used laptop that isn't embarrassing and for a 2-month buffer. You sound like a boring adult, I said, and he made the small pleased sound men make when they've been waiting to be called that. We set a dinner for Sunday. He arrived on time, wearing a cheap wool coat that fit him like he'd found his size. The coat was nothing, but something about the way he wore it said, earned. Today, he helped me shovel the walk after we ate and told me about the night the dock door froze, and Dale taught him how to kick the hinge with the exact right toe angle and a curse that starts with F and ends with everything. Dad, he said out of nowhere, leaning on the shovel, breath clouding. I keep thinking about the way Mom used to fold laundry, how she'd snap the towels on the line in the summer like a drum beat. I thought it was nothing, but she made straight rows too. She did, I said. She built a life out of them. We drove to the cemetery with a grocery store bouquet, a new quiet in the car that felt like peace, not absence. He crouched and traced Laura's name with a glove. I'm trying, he said, voice steady. I wish you could see. She does, I said. I don't believe in magic, but I believe in the way effort echoes. Back at the house, he pulled a notebook from his backpack. Budget report, he said, like a kid delivering the news. The pages were more detailed now. Line items, dates, small notes in the margins about mistakes. Bought coffee on break, next time thermos. He'd circled a number, $3,000. Emergency fund, he said, by April. Ambitious. Straight rows, he answered, and we smiled like a password had just been correctly exchanged. He left just after dark. I watched him walk to the bus stop, head down, shoulders squared in that coat, and I felt something loosen even further inside me. It wasn't absolution. It was permission. The next week he called with a problem he didn't hide. Midterm in operations management kicked my ass, he said. I passed, but barely. I wanted to tell you before you ask so we can talk strategy. Okay, I said. And a part of me, small, mean, tired, wanted to say told you so, and another part, bigger, better, wanted to say thank you. Professor holds office hours at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays, he continued. I can go straight there from work. And I found a YouTube series that explains queuing theory like we're 5. You sound like a man who wants to win more than he wants to be right. Yeah, he said, and then, I also called the bursar and asked about payment plan options for next semester if overtime dries up. I figured you'd want me to have contingencies. I do, I said, and felt the strange pleasure of being seen accurately by your own child. On a grey Saturday, he called from the Harold Washington Library again. I'm in the children's section, he said. It's quiet. I forgot how good it smells in here, like paper and clean. Do you think Mom would laugh if she saw me here learning math like a kindergartner? She'd take a picture, I said. She'd put it on the fridge and write my favorite student under it with a heart. He didn't answer. I heard him breathe. Then, I'm not asking you to say it, but I want to be your favorite student. You're my only student, I said, and my only son. We stayed on the line for a long time without talking, the way you can when the line itself is the point. March arrived in slush boots and a bad temper. On the second Tuesday, Ethan called at 4:11 a.m. mid-shift, voice low. Something happened, he said. No one's hurt, but I made a call and I don't know if it was the right one. Tell me, He explained, a pallet of cleaning supplies had been stacked poorly by a new hire. The plastic wrap looked snug, but was loose 2 rows down. He had 2 choices, push the load and pray or break it down and rebuild, which would mean a late truck, which would mean a manager's email, which would mean eyes on him. He'd taken the time. We missed the window by 17 minutes, he said. I wrote the report, I own it. And? My manager didn't yell, he said, surprised. He nodded. He said, good call. Then he told me to fix the training sheet. You built a straight row, I said. He exhaled. Yeah. But the week tilted anyway. The next day, an old friend texted him, dangling free tickets to a show downtown. He said no. They said he was boring now. He didn't call me about it until 2 days later, and when he did, the brittle in his voice hurt worse than the insult. I didn't know how much of my life was built on people who liked me most when I was paying, he said. That's a good thing to know, I said. It doesn't feel good. No, I said. Most of the true things don't. He laughed without humor. You're not going to tell me it gets better, are you? It gets different, I said. And then you realize different is better. On Sunday, he sent a budget report with a new line item at the bottom. Fun, $15. Under it, he'd written, library DVD, cheap coffee with a co-worker on his break, basketball at the park. It looked like a child's allowance. It looked like a life being built from the nails up. Mid-March, he came over with a bag of screws and a bent picture frame. Can you teach me how to fix this? He asked. We set the frame on the dining table, and I showed him how to square it with a carpenter's triangle and a clamp. He watched like I was showing him a card trick. When we were done, the corners met flush. He held it up and grinned. I didn't know it could be this easy. It's not easy, I said. It's precise. Like budgets. Like love, I said, and he went still. We sat there with the fixed frame between us like an emblem of something that would hold. Spring didn't announce itself. It edged in. The hydrangea sticks out back showed green at the tips like a secret. On a Sunday in April, Ethan and I drove south to the lake. He'd brought stale bread because Laura used to scold people for feeding birds, anything else. We stood on the concrete by the water treatment plant and tossed pieces to gulls that didn't deserve the view. Mum taught me to drive in this parking lot, he said. She yelled at me exactly once, and then she apologized for yelling. She apologized because she scared herself, I said. She loved how you got mad and then got it right. He nodded. I wrote about her for my capstone, he said, almost shy, about how grief is a teacher with lousy bedside manner. Good line, I said. He shrugged. It's true. Back home, we cleaned out the garage. He found the box with Laura's choir music and sat on the concrete floor reading song titles aloud. She sang all the sad ones, he said. She sang them happy, I said. He put the box back carefully and labeled it in big, neat letters. Mum, keep. Later that week, he called with news he wore like a jacket that finally fit. Supervisor job, he said. Official. Benefits. They said it's because I don't lie about late trucks. That's a good reason, I said. And there's this thing, he continued. He offers tuition help for night classes if you do 2 more years. Management stuff. I think I want to do it. Then do it, I said. Build the next straight row. He didn't celebrate with a steak. He texted me a photo of a bowl of cereal and a cheap paperback. Party, he wrote. I laughed out loud alone in my kitchen and felt Laura in that laugh, the way she used to grin at the joke of us. We hit the 6-month mark and sat at my dining table with the original terms. He laid his budget notebook down beside them like a credential. He'd met the job requirement, the grades, the no loans rule. He'd missed one report in February and wrote, "My mistake," at the top of the next one in letters so large you could see them from space. You've done what you said, I told him, which means I'll do what I said. We reassess. He shifted in his chair but didn't lean forward to take more than he was given. "I'd like to keep paying my rent," he said. "I want to keep the room. It keeps me honest." "Okay," I said, surprised and pleased. "What do you need from me?" "Dinner on Sundays," he said, and then, almost under his breath, "and grace if I stumble." "Done," I said, "on both counts." May brought a run of clear days that felt like the city was apologizing for January. Ethan texted a photo in a cheap cap and gown, the kind they make out of polyester and hope. "Graduation rehearsal," he wrote. "Real thing next week." At the ceremony, I sat too far back to see his face, so I watched for the tilt of his head, the way he walks as if the floor is a contract he's trying to honor. When he took the stage, the auditorium cheered like rain on a tin roof. He found me in the sea and lifted the diploma with his hand like a worker, showing a tool he knows how to use. After, in the parking lot, he didn't hand me flowers or make a speech. He hugged me. Long. When he stepped back, he said, "I want to dedicate this to the woman who taught me hymns and the man who taught me budgets." "She'd be mad she came first," I said, and we both laughed because we knew she wouldn't. We didn't go to a fancy restaurant. We drove to a diner on Roosevelt with cracked vinyl booths and a server who called us honey. He ordered pancakes and ate them like a prayer. I drank coffee that tasted like the 80s. We talked about what comes next. Salary, night classes, the long haul. Halfway through June, he texted a photo of an open savings account screen with a number I recognized, $3,000. "Emergency fund achieved," he wrote. "Feels like a second spine." "That's what it is," I replied. He started the night classes. He read case studies on the bus, highlighter in hand. He helped a new kid at work fix a crooked pallet and didn't mention the 17-minute story unless it would help. On a Sunday, he knocked on my door with a plain brown bag. Inside was a photo album, real with pages and ink and the small translucent sheets you pull back. "For your birthday," he said. "Printed pictures. I know you hate how they live in our phones." Each page was a piece of work. Laura at Lake Geneva, Laura at the piano, Laura holding Ethan on the first day of kindergarten, me and Ethan in front of the old CRV. In the back, he'd slipped his new letter, another one, longer, clean-lined, about work and love and the dignity of the ordinary. I didn't cry while he watched. After he left, I did. The way a man cries when he is both grateful and furious at time. July broke like a glass. Sudden heat, street festivals, the smell of grills from porches. Ethan called one night after class. "Group project," he groaned. "The kid with the Patagonia vest wants to do everything last minute and talk about hustle." "Lead without saying you're leading," I said. "Make a checklist and smile like it was his idea." He laughed. "I did. It worked. I also used your trick." "Which one?" "The one where you ask the quiet person what they think first. She saved the whole plan." "That's management," I said, "not the title, the act." He had a week where the shifts piled and the class load didn't blink. He missed our Sunday. He texted first, "I can't make dinner, I'm sorry. I'll call after the storm." The storm was 2 finals and a shipment that came in mislabeled. He didn't ask me to fix any of it. At the end of the week, he showed up with flowers from the discount rack and a vanilla cake with a crooked thanks written by a teenager. "For what?" I asked. "For not turning back on the faucet when I threw the fit," he said. We ate the cake with coffee. It tasted like the kind of party we could live with. August in Chicago is an orchestra of cicadas. We sat on my back steps with lemonade, the hydrangeas finally showing off. Ethan scrolled through his phone and then put it face down, a habit he'd learned that felt like love to me. "They offered me a path," he said. "Not a promise. A path to assistant manager within a year if I keep the numbers right and the rows straight." "You going to take it?" "I already am," he said. I looked at cheap used cars. He glanced at me quickly, then away. "I'm not asking you to co-sign. I'm telling you, I'm waiting. Bus and boots are fine for now. When it's time, it'll be my name on the line." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it go. "That's a good plan," I said. "The right kind of patience." He picked a hydrangea petal and set it on his palm like a small boat. "I said something in class today," he added. "We were talking about sunk costs, and I told them about how love isn't a sunk cost. It's a series of current ones. You don't get to coast on what you did 2 years ago. You pay attention today." "And what did they say?" "Someone said that sounds exhausting." He smiled. "I said it is, and it's worth it." The year turned again. September brought its smell of pencil shavings and possibility. On a Tuesday, one of our Tuesdays, I called at the usual time. He answered on the second ring, the way he does now, like a man who keeps promises even to clocks. "Hey, kid," I said, because some rituals are a spine too. "Hey, Dad," he said, and I could hear the smile. "I was thinking," I said, looking at the hydrangeas out the window, their heads heavy and beautiful at once. "About the day everything cracked, about the words." "I think about them too," he said. "Not with shame, with memory." "We've built a lot since then," I said. "We have," he said, "and we're still building." That Sunday we fixed a cabinet hinge in my kitchen that had been loose since Laura was here to scold it. He found the right bit without me asking. I held the door steady while he drove the screw in slow. The metal met wood with that satisfying final turn. We both stepped back and watched it swing, true and quiet. "Look at that," he said, slightly proud, entirely gentle. "Straight rows," I said. He nodded. "Straight rows." Dinner was lentils and salad, and a conversation about next year's night classes and whether hydrangeas like coffee grounds. After we drove to the cemetery with cheap flowers and better words, he knelt, touched his mother's name like a prayer, and then looked up at me. Not for permission, for witness. On the way home, we stopped at the lake. The water was a grey too honest to be called blue. We stood with our hands in our jacket pockets and watched a freighter move across the horizon so slowly it looked still. "It takes them a mile to stop," he said, "even when they've decided." "We did it faster," I said. "Only because you pulled the lever," he answered. He stopped. "Thank you." I wanted to say the fancy thing about grace and grit, about the alchemy of boundaries and love. Instead, I said the truest one. "You're welcome." When I got home, I took the photo album off the shelf and flipped to a picture of Laura with her head thrown back laughing. I set it on the piano and lit the room's one good lamp. The house still goes quiet at night. It always will. But now, the quiet feels like a held note, not an empty room. If you're listening and your life is in a season of consequence, I can't tell you it will be easy, but I can tell you this: love with a spine is still love. And sometimes, the straightest rows are the ones you lay when your hands are shaking.